What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of T-Dub's Film Room, brought to you by thebarnauburn.com. We're back for another commit breakdown video, this time an absolute freak on the defensive side of the ball for DJ Durkin to work with. Let's check it out. All right, real quick before we do, there's a code called BARN20 that you can put in here at roback.com, and you can get 20% off. And I was just looking around. I typed in Auburn in the search bar here. You've got these little like old school like Aubie logo polos, and then the Auburn, like the new Auburn logo polo. But then look at this, like the quarter zip, and then this hoodie right here. Like I'm probably gonna have to buy that. So Barn20, put that in the your promo code or whatever, save 20% and get on some of this stuff because it's pretty sweet. All right, so let's look. We got Jaquez Wilkes. All right, in-state kid, Wadley, Alabama. We'll talk about the competition and stuff like that, but look, industry 4-star kid, top 140 player across the three main sites there, top 10 player in the state of Alabama. So this is a blue chip, legit prospect. 6'4", 218 edge. We need to be smarter. We'll look at the tape. He's not going to be an edge now. He's going to be very versatile. We'll look at that, but he's a linebacker. All right, so let's just call him a linebacker. But look, beating out Texas A&M, Miami, a lot of these others, other schools. Alabama recruited him, Georgia. So, legit SEC prospect. Really excited about him. But let's look at the film. All right, so here he is, and you can tell, okay? And look, I can say this because when I was growing up, this was more like my high school over here, okay? Competition's not great, all right? Competition's not great. And when you were one of these guys like in the white here playing against a team that has somebody like this, it's just like, dude, what are we going to do? He's a freak, all right? He's listed at 6'4", 220 or so. We'll talk about comps in a minute, so that's 6'4", who knows, but he's long, all right? You can watch him running around and see he's got a ton of length. He's got a ton of strength, all right? On the defensive side of the ball, that length obviously equates to range, being able to cover, sideline to sideline is what everybody likes to say, right? But by all accounts, we are recruiting him as a Mike linebacker. So there's a lot of things that I like about his length for the position, meaning what does your length help you do? What are your long arms? What does that help you do from the inside, from like a box linebacker standpoint? It's not just running over there and being able to cover a bunch of ground. That's part of it. But one thing that I think, he just looks really strong, and I think he's going to be able to use his arm length to strike and shed or disengage. And that was a good example, but this guy's not going to be a, SEC offensive guard, okay? But I think he's going to be able to use his arm length and his strength to be able to strike, shed, disengage from offensive linemen when they were trying to block downhill, double team, climb to second level, whatever's happening. I think that length is going to help him. Somebody that just popped in my head, this is not my comp, so I'm just going to say it, but like somebody like Rolando McClain, 6'4", 250, Mike Backer back in the day, right? And he was long, but he was so strong everywhere that he was almost impossible to touch because his arms were so long, and he could just keep offensive linemen off of him. And obviously using that length and that wingspan to be side to side, or sideline to sideline, side to side, chasing stuff down like that. He's going to be a versatile guy. We're going to use him everywhere. Durkin is really good about using guys. I was watching some of the spring, YouTube footage from like the spring day, whatever you want to call that, and there was a play or two where we had Chris Murray lined up as kind of that dime inside backer, and we've seen Kieron Crawford do that. We've seen Jalen McLeod do that, where they're taking the Bucks and they're putting them positionally as a inside linebacker. And I think we're doing that because I think Durkin likes to have a guy with that kind of skill set in the middle of the box, depending on, down and distance situations, stuff like that. But I think his ideal scenario is having a guy like this, having a guy even like a JJ Falk, I think, where, look, maybe their primary position is a Mike linebacker. Like, I think Jaquez Wilkes is going to be a Mike linebacker. But he can absolutely, there's no question, you can spend 5 minutes daily at practice and individual drills, working with some edge rusher, coaches and position groups, working on some stunts maybe, and just, getting some work in to stay sharp as far as rushing from the edge, and the technique, different moves, spin moves, swim moves, long arm, bull rush, like all the stuff you can do. But at the end of the day, man, like you can also just line them up on the edge and say, go on 3rd and 12, that right there. This was the one that I've kind of been waiting on for him to get to. Again, we're talking about competition. This is not good competition. But that's absolutely just ridiculous. Watching this guy be that kind of coordinated in his body already. Like, he's just going to get huge. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. He's going to get faster. That's why I think, Durkin, by all accounts, kind of latched onto this dude and said, look, like, you're going to be my Mike linebacker for this class. We like other guys, Shadarius Tootle, some of these other guys. But I think Durkin, by all accounts, kind of zoned in on this kid. In-state guy, you got to love that. And I love the way he plays. He's obviously really physical. And the same way that you had to do a little bit of projection with, like, DeMarcus Riddick, they're different players. But with the competition level and all that kind of stuff, like, all it's really going to come down to with him, and this is kind of what we talked about with Wilson Zaire too, is like, this is not a guy that has some type of limitation due to frame or like God-gifted ability and athleticism. Like, he can be a first-round draft pick if things go right for him, based on just, who he is as a high school prospect, as a developmental prospect. That right there, again, look, we know that this is not a 5-star offensive lineman trying to block him, okay? But watch this. Boom, right there, disengaged tackle. Like, I think he's going to be really good at that. So, look, again, the highlights are not, like I said, it's a lot like watching DeMarcus Riddick's highlights from last year. You can obviously tell this dude's a freak. Like, how am I supposed to tell how good he can be his freshman year, especially like all the way his junior, senior year? All you know is this is the ball of clay that you want on defense. At this point, I think, Auburn people, and really any other fan base that would have DJ Durkin as a defensive coordinator, it's well documented. Ohio State came after him last offseason, and we paid up to keep him. I love that. If Durkin wants you, then I'm just going to trust it. Okay, I'm going to trust that all the off the field intangible, I'm going to trust that this kid loves football. Otherwise, Durkin probably wouldn't want him. And if all those things are true and he's going to put in the work, then yeah, the sky's the limit for this kid. So let's look at a comp. Interested to see what you guys think about this one. All right, Trenton Simpson. I think this is a really good comp. They're a little bit different. Here he is in a spy. So ironically, we're talking about like the differences between Wilkes and like DeMarcus Riddick as prospects. And this is like a DeMarcus Riddick play if I've ever seen one. Okay. But just look at his body. Like, this is what Jaquez Wilkes looks like. Now, Trenton, I think, is listed at like 6'2" or 6'3", 236 pounds, something like that. So he's not listed at, but like, he's long. Like, it's very clear that he's long. You never know, like, these heights and weights and whatever. But like, what Trenton Simpson, again, you just saw him rush off the edge, right? Like, he's going to be a versatile player as an inside linebacker, all right? Clemson used him in a lot of different ways. Right now, he's playing with the Ravens. I think he was a 3rd-round draft pick, all right? He's a starting linebacker for the Ravens. Took him like a season or two to kind of get, I think, grounded in the NFL, God forbid. But he is a starting linebacker for the Ravens, and last year he made some freaking good plays. I'm a Texans fan, and I saw some of them myself. Here he is. Again, the range with the length, obviously the speed and athleticism. I like this comp, obviously, since I picked it. I watched some of his highlights from his Ravens video as well. I think I can probably get to that pretty quick. Let's see. Yeah, let's just pick this up real quick. All right, so here he is, 23. All right. Again, kind of in just like a zone here, chasing down Bo Nix. Okay. So look, if you're taking a comp of a guy, here he is rushing from the box there, arm over. Gotta love that. If you're talking about a guy that Auburn's recruiting right now, that I'm able to pull up his Ravens 2024 highlights from him as a starting linebacker for the Ravens. Okay. I think that kind of puts Jaquez Wilkes in perspective of who he could be. All right. And I don't think I'm a Barner for doing this. Like, I think, if you watch Jaquez Wilkes on tape, I think there's a lot of things anybody would like. He's a 4-star kid. He's a top 150 prospect nationally. All right. So sky's the limit for him. But yeah, I think this is a really good comp. Trenton Simpson, again, he's a young guy still in the NFL, and I think he's going to have a really good career. There he is right there, being physical in the run game. So obviously, I'm really high on Jaquez Wilkes. This is, to be frank, like this is a guy that the first time I watched this film, I was like, I actually kind of like Shadarius Tootle's film a little better, but as I watch more and more, I still really like Shadarius Tootle. He's, obviously committed to Georgia. I'd be thrilled if they both ended up in the class. I think that'd be stellar, because then you're talking about being able to really move guys around. But the more and more I watch Jaquez's film, the more I'm like, okay, I get it. It's kind of the same thing with Riddick. You're having to take this ball of clay and just trust that the development and you got to plan for a guy, especially his freshman year, that kind of stuff. So you got to love the length and the athleticism at that linebacker. That's the prototype now. Those short, stocky guys that are just downhill thumpers, that's not what the NFL really wants anymore. So he's in the mold of the modern era NFL linebackers. You got to love that. But again, we've got some more stuff coming out, so keep it locked right here. The barn.com, barnauburn.com, T-Dubs Film Room. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. See you next time.